Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Like everything else in life, I just fly by the seat of my pants.
Yeah, well,
That's how we do it at the Buff.
Yeah,
Welcome back to
someday.
Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Harry. I feel like we haven't done this in forever, Rafe.
Well, we haven't, because we did a bunch of stuff and now we're filling in some gaps. While let's put it this way: we are not in the normal recording configuration. Is that a fair way to say it?
I would say that's accurate.
Yeah.
No, not a normal configuration, not a normal time of day. I'm over here munching on lunch.
Yeah. And you're munching on lunch and I am past dinner. So I'll let people infer from that what they may. But other than that, Harry, it's a great day to be doing a podcast with you. And we are grateful, as usual, to all our listeners who have made us a global top 10% podcast. You know what's really interesting is people ask me that. It was like, what does that even mean? It's like, well, there's data. We have actual data. And if you guys need to see it, let me know. Send me a note and I'll send you the confirmation of that statement. But we are grateful to you for what you do for us. And we hope that we can do things for you in retrospect. So remember to hit the smiley star button, the like button, the subscribe button, the follow button, all those. Hit the buttons that make my life better, Harry's life better, and then your life will be better. Tell a friend to listen and you will get a free episode. Give us 5-star reviews. If you can come up with a way to give us a 6-star review, we would take that as well. 7 stars would be off the charts, and that would be a great thing. But you know what? You are our marketing arm. Harry, I ran into somebody the other day at a transportation station, I'll just call it that. And we were talking about the Buff, and they were very excited to hear about that. And they are now apparently loyal followers of the Buff, which is great. It's fun to
You're like
meet
on
people out there in
basically the European tour.
I'm kind of
the podcast.
Yeah, it is kind of. Yes, it is. It is kind of that. So, Harry, right now, this is episode something like. It's hard to count these exactly because there's special editions and redrops and things like that. It's something like episode 201.
Okay.
And what I'd like to do, because you filled in for Zach when he had to take some leave there coming up about 100 episodes ago. And what I want to do just a little bit, this is a short episode just to keep everybody on pace with things that are going on. It's a busy summer, but it has been a whirlwind of things that we have done since you started buffing with us. And I kind of want to go through that and see what what are your feelings?
I guess there's been a lot of things that we've talked about, right? You sent out the notes for this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let the readers in on a secret of what Rafe's notes look like sometimes.
Okay. So just before we start, these are notes. These are not edited text descriptions of anything important, like misspellings, very poor capitalization and punctuation. It's kind of stream of consciousness, but on the keyboard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rafe asked me, he's like, so, you've done almost half the episodes. We've done a whole bunch of different things. What have you learned? What have you experienced? What have you seen? And I had to go back through this list and just see what I've talked about. And some of these things include, but are not limited to, the Pilgrims,
Yep.
Rockets,
Yeah.
Virtue, Shrove Tuesday, getting through hard times, our Shackleton series, which I'm going to put a little asterisk there because I think that's probably the best stuff we've done.
Okay. All right.
History of math, Badgers, Bees.
Badgers. Okay, wait. Let's keep in mind the Badger one was it really took me for a loop because we've talked about Badgers like in other contexts for a long time, just general appreciation of Badgers. But it wasn't until I really went and read about Badgers to find out how really awesome they are. The Badger episode is, to me, it's remarkable on a number of levels because first of all, it's about Badgers, which puts it right near the top. But then the things that we learned, didn't we learn that they can run like 900 miles an hour or something like
They're
that?
super fast.
Yeah, they're really fast, and they are really scary. And there are no badgers in Wisconsin except the ones that play sports, pretty much.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
So that's been some things.
Yep, badgers.
Poetry, AI, Frankenstein, other literature, Cinnamon Rolls, Saints, and Prodigal Son. I don't know if that was all one episode. Or
No, that was one episode. I went back and actually listened to that the other day, and I'm trying to figure out what pointed me to listen to that. I might have listened to it. Well, I remember I was in a vehicle driving, either driving or I was on a plane or something like that. That's a really, really good episode, Harry. I'm going to suggest that the readers.
At the end of this, you're going to have to need a description that says, listen to the following episodes, because we think that they're really good. And just would be numbers 1 through 199, 200.
1 through 199. Yeah, I guess that's the thing. You should, you know what? If you were the loyal listeners of the Buff will have at their ready the entire canon of the Buff. And
that's right. Yep.
You know what here's what we do. If somebody wants to do a project, here's a little AI project or a programming project or something. If somebody knows somebody out there wants to do a master's project, how about this? Why don't you listen to all the Buff episodes, or have like your AI friend listen to all the Buff episodes? Not just read the descriptions, but actually listen to the episodes, and then make us an index of topics on the Buff that point, like there's a topic like, well, for example, badgers. And it would say whatever episode that was. And it would probably this one too, because we talk about the badger episode. Mm-hmm. And so anytime we talk about virtue or we talk about redemption or things like that, then that would be in there. And that prodigal son one, I went back and listened to it and I thought, hey, Harry, we did a good job. That was a good one.
Go us. So some others. Our Lady Guadalupe, Maximilian Kolbe, Boromir's Death, Lord of the Rings, Your Current European Vacation Summer School Extravagant. Excuse me. The Bufnagle European Trip, which was just vacation with you and Mom.
Yes.
Right. Faith Moore and Princesses. Water, Wind, Springtime, Eclipses, Bees. I think I already mentioned Bees. Lightspeed, and Father Zachary Elliott.
Elliott Zach.
Excuse me.
Yes. I always get it mixed up too. Yeah, I can remember his initials are Easy. He told me one time that they called him when he played baseball when they were a kid. His initials are Easy, and they called him Easy Out, which.
So that's why he's a priest and not batting second for the Yankees.
Yeah, that's right. So there is a lot of interesting stuff out there, and it was surprising to me when I went back in there because I have these recollections of these episodes that we've talked about, but to go back every now and then and re-listen to some of the one that sticks out in my head when I went back through the list was the one that I did on a whim one day on the movie Rocky. And I think I happened to be perusing the YouTube, what do you call it? The clips, the YouTube clips or something like that. And somebody had some clips from Rocky on there. And I had forgotten how, some of those, I guess today there's this I don't know what you call it. This. See, I'm not going to edit this. I'll let you think about how difficult some of these words are. There's this push to ensure that movies and stories avoid campiness or stereotypicalness, but sometimes it's okay if it's a little like if it's a good story and it tells you and it provides virtue and an example of leadership or heroism, then there's nothing like give me a story that doesn't have a little bit of camp in it, right? That give me a good story that doesn't play on a stereotype here or there. I think we set the bar so high, and it's so easy to fall into a cult of one person on the interwebs says something snarky and negative about anything, and suddenly there'll be a whole flock of people in the wake of that going, yeah, rah, 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 rah. And then somebody have to jump up on the other side to try to counter that wake going the other way. And it becomes it's not a situation where people are looking to really provide help and discernment, but it's rather one of how many clicks can I get, and can I get people to give me smiley stars on my little, whatever it is, my Instagram feed. I think Rocky was great. I think Rocky's a great movie. And I understand there are things that are in there that are dated. because every bit of art reflects its time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are you going to say? Homer sucked because it was written 3,000 years ago? Oh, no, it's dated. We have cars now. We don't have. We have boats with sonar. You know, I mean,
that's
and
one
we
of those
know there
things
aren't
we
any
always talk
mermaids.
about.
Really weren't mermaids. It was like, okay, stop. You know, just.
It's one of the things we talk about. It's like the human issues always remain, no matter
Yes.
the medium, right? So,
Yep.
You're still going to struggle with certain things in interactions and conversations. The human element never goes away, and that's what art does. Is it reflects all of that in real time. And just because you think that Rocky is campy doesn't mean that it doesn't have timeless values.
Yeah, and I think that to me is what makes it great. And there's people talk about Star Wars too. Star Wars is starting to, because of what's happened to the Star Wars after, episode 9,000 or wherever they are now with different spin-offs of all the Star Wars things. I love the original Star Wars movie for a number, and basically because it was written for me in my time, right? I hadn't read a lot of Arthurian legend. I kind of recognized that was, but it was so new and it was so fresh and it was such a great thing at the time. And it came after another one of my favorite movies that I didn't see at the time, which is American Graffiti, which I think is also a great movie. I love Star Wars, and I know the acting isn't particularly great, but it does have James Earl Jones, and it's got Alec Guinness in it, and that's all a wonderful thing.
Okay, so what makes James Earl Jones so great?
Well, he's the voice of Darth Vader. He was like those characters, Harry, came out of nowhere. Like the thing we had before that, we had Star Trek, which was fun because it was so campy, with Shatner playing Captain James Tiberius Kirk, right? But other than that, it was that's what we had. We had that, and then we had. Did you ever see Lost in Space with that robot with the arms?
No, I didn't.
Danger, Will Robinson, and all. We just had they were bizarre and terrible. And we did have 2001: Space Odyssey, which was kind of people said it was great. And I know, you know what? Bob's going to come on this episode afterwards, and he's going to say, "I love 2001: Space Odyssey," but I've seen it, and I think it's a little overhyped. It's like it's all cryptic message and no real story, but it does have some great quotes about Hal, right? And you can use that to refer to AI and things like that. But James Earl Jones is great. Alec Guinness was great. Alec Guinness was in The Bridge Over the River Kwai. Have you ever seen that?
I think you've attempted to make me watch it, and I just got a little bored.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that happens. So, anyway, so I thought the Star Wars was great. I love Rocky, and I think every 12-year-old boy should watch Rocky, and a lot of 12-year-old girls should watch Rocky, just so that they know what the 12-year-old boys are watching. It is, you have to. What did we say in that episode? You have to. A man must fight his dragons, and you have to do those things, and you have to live a life that allows you to become the wisdom is seeking the good, and the good is the path you follow to become the person you were meant to be. And in the movie, Rocky is he's just a leg breaker for a loan shark. And his coach gets on him and he says, it's a waste of a life. It's not a living. It's a waste of a life. And Rocky recognizes that he's right. And you have to follow that.
Well, you can't give away too many spoilers because then no one's going to go back and listen to the Rocky episode. Okay,
but listen to the Rocky episode.
Yes.
There we go.
That's good. Very good.
So the Rocky was good. Shackleton is...
I thought that was... I had, when I first started doing this with you and taking over for Zach, my first thought was, I'm going to have to do this podcasting thing with my dad. And all he ever does is just meanders and talks and doesn't let me talk. And because I was, that you were very good at explaining things. You go in depth, and sometimes it's a little tough to reel you back in. But with Shackleton, we were able to do it together, and we had to both read the book and do the book report and learn things together. And I'm very grateful for my brother-in-law, Chris, to give me the book for Christmas 2 years ago. It was fantastic. It was wonderful.
I took his copy. And I'm not sure where he got the copy because we might have given it to him. your mom might have given it to him as a book, or maybe.
But I think that one was fantastic, and it was. I remember reading the book, and Jamie turns to me and goes, "Why are you crying?" I was like, you read this whole heroic story that defies all odds, and I thought it was incredible. And then to go back and do it with you for 6 episodes was a lot of fun. And I think after that, I thought to myself, wow, this is a really fun hobby activity thing to do with my dad.
Yeah, and I will say that when I tell people, like I told the people at the train station the other day that I do a podcast with my sons, they looked at me like that's the most brilliant idea I've ever heard. and we have Zach to thank for that.
Yes. Yep.
So that is he's the one who pushed. Do you remember him pushing? What are we going to talk about? Zach was like, "We're going to talk about stuff," and it kind of started that way. And if you listen to the first couple episodes, it took us a while. What do they say? It takes a while to get your rhythm, right? To get your feet under you. But I think it has turned out to be a pretty good thing.
Oh, I think so as well. And, as you said that, to kind of get your feet underneath you, some of our first episodes, right, where I just pulled them all up. Some of the first episodes are lessons from sports. Is cheesecake a cake or a pie?
Yeah.
GPS stuff, spirit of radio, pie economics, fitness donut in my mouth.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of really random shenanigans, bet on yourself, exploring, is Santa an elf, and all these little tiny topics.
Yeah.
And then, we have kind of grown into this, I'm going to say more fleshed out, more in-depth types of topics. Occasionally we have things like badgers.
Well, it was interesting to me. Just the other day, I was talking to somebody at lunch, a new friend. I was talking to a new friend, and we were talking about the kinds of. Okay, we were talking about the good. Okay, and there were questions that this person was raising about the nature of man and the nature of the relationship between man and nature and God and all of these kinds of things. And it was amazing to me how I had answers to all of these. I mean, and maybe they weren't perfect answers, and I'm sure, and I think they were pretty close to right, but they were answers. And almost all of the things that I was able to talk about, I've gotten from doing research and presenting things here on the Buff. It has provided me this just a tiny bit of the wisdom and the glory that is the Western canon. That's really what we're doing here. I mean, let's
right. Yeah, we establish it with Aristotle and Cleopatra the Greek and Romans and everything from Europe and how it's transitioned. Yeah, absolutely.
And so we have that, but now it's in my head because I do this every week. We do these things and we study it and we read it and we try really hard to pass it on in a way that's going to be helpful to others. And so I look at it as what did you leave your children and what did you leave your grandchildren? Because someday I will pass to the great bufnagle studios in the sky. and that'll be a thing I can, and part of this is this
from the fourth gate along the wall.
Hopefully not from one of the 9 levels below, but hopefully from one of the 9 levels above. We're broadcasting live with Dante and Beatrice. And I can make that joke now because I know who they are. Okay,
right.
And I kind of knew that Dante, but I didn't know this. I didn't really know all these pieces. And I'm going to say this: like, if you're going to, you have to have I guess I'll call it you have to have this overarching philosophy of life, of what you believe and how it all fits together, and it needs to be I guess I'll call it a consistent worldview. You have to have a consistent worldview, and I think what I've discovered over the last 3 years it's been 3 years now of doing this podcast. Is it been 3 or is it going to be 4?
We started. Let's see. The first one says
this is 4.
November. This will be 4. September 8th, 2020.
Yeah, so we're coming up on 4 years of this, and what's happened to me is although I had the pieces before, I now have like references and precedents to previous really smart people. I mean, not you can listen to us, or you can think you're listening to us, but you really listen to us channeling really smart people is what you're doing. And I see, these people thought about this stuff all the time. And now I have a consistent worldview. I have an ethic that guides what I think and what I know. And it's really helpful to understand what happened in the past and what we're going to do in the future. I don't, for anybody who's tempted to say it, I don't think we need to go back to 1950, but we need to find out what was right in 1950 and figure out how that piece can be put into the current puzzle, and what was right about 1850 and about 1650 and about 50 and all the way back to.
And my guess is those things are all the same thing.
They are the same thing. And like we said, technology changes, but the nature of man stays the same. And you have to recognize how people, any problem you're having right now is a problem somebody has had in the past, and people have thought about how to solve it. Any of our political problems, any of our societal problems, our cultural problems, whatever we see as problems, they have existed in the past in a different form. And the more you can learn about what the other people did, the better off you will be. So that's why we seek the good.
Yeah. And for the rest of the notes was, what did you learn? So that was question 1.
Yeah.
And you geared these towards me, but as usual, you decided to answer them for yourself. The second one was, how has your experience been? Yeah. And I think this is interesting because you've had it kind of broken up into 2 parts. This first century and the second century.
Oh, yeah.
I guess we're now on the 3rd century of
we're starting the 3rd
podcast.
Century, yeah.
How has your experience been?
My experience?
Yeah. We'll start with you because then we can go to me.
It has been overwhelming. I have to say, I'm embarrassed to say, but I will say it honestly. I'm embarrassed to say that my consistent worldview was thin at best, if not absent. I mean, I was I regularly went to church, and I read some stuff in the catechism, and I kind of understood kind of a Catholic rule book kind of thing. And I generally had a feeling for what was right and wrong. But, I'll tell you this, I never understood the concept of justice. Like I had trouble defining that because I knew that things felt just and unjust. I could kind of see that, but I wasn't able to describe it. And this concept of like I just mentioned earlier, that the good, your good is the path you follow to become the person you were meant to be. That's a recent thing that I've gotten out of the books I've read and the things I listened to over the last 4 years that has really helped solidify this. So, the ideas of justice, the ideas of love. Mark Dice helped me a lot with getting the Aquinas definition right, which is love, willing the good of the other as other. Don't forget that last little bit, because otherwise you become a tyrant, right? And my experience has been been the greatest broad experience of my life, other than being married and being a father. It has been doing the podcast, and I have you and your brother to thank for that. It's been phenomenal. And the other thing is, the Buff has created a global brand with essentially no product, which has been a bigly funny thing to do.
So you're saying we are operating at a loss?
Well, you know what? Okay, there are metrics out there other than economic utility. Let's just put it that way.
We've actually spoken about that a couple of times there on the podcast.
So that's what has your experience been?
So I'll be honest. My experience at first was begrudgingly accepting.
Uh-huh.
I have to do this. I got to fill in for Zach. I got to take all this time. And now I have it as a catalog of ideas and conversations with my dad, which is, I don't think I know anybody else that records their conversations with their parents and then asks the rest of the world to listen in. But I think it's a lot of fun. I have learned a lot more than I would have ever expected to. And granted, a lot of it is these big brush strokes, right?
Right.
Obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of badger anatomy. I probably couldn't tell you every single scene and sequence in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
I can't tell you the exact orbital mechanics that make an eclipse work.
Right.
But I've learned about all of these things at least at a surface level, right? And my breadth is a lot wider. My lake is a lot bigger, and in some places it's a lot deeper.
One thing I found with doing all these topics that seem to be disparate is it's kind of like learning. Sometimes when you're reading a story, current books are more like this. Old books used to be just linear. Start at the beginning, you go to the end, and you're done. But now a book or a movie like the Jason Bourne movies, they throw you a little piece, they throw you another piece, and you're holding all these pieces, and you have to try to put them together. But then slowly you see how the pieces come together, and you start generating these pictures of the puzzle. And you're never going to get the full puzzle filled in, but you have a little piece here that a chunk of pieces, a piece of the whole, which is a chunk of little pieces. And suddenly you can start hooking these together. Like one thing we haven't gotten to in the speed of light one, which we may or may not do, is the whole idea about how Einstein's general relativity adds gravity to the mix, to the equation, and what happens when you start thinking about how gravity functions and what it does to light and things like that. And the notes that our friend Fowler at Virginia put together, they take you right to the place where one of the earliest episodes we ever did was on the GPS. Mm-hmm. How the fact that because those satellites are very far away in orbit, they're in a very low gravitational field, that time actually speeds up. And it appears the time speeds up, but because the satellites are traveling fast, time is slowing down. But those two things don't cancel out, and the clocks are out of sync with the ones here on Earth, and they have to adjust the clock rate on the satellites to get them to appear to be correct. And that was one of the things that I learned. I'll bet it was 15 years ago when I first read that in a book, and that was one of the episodes when Zach and I started talking. I said, I'm going to talk about the GPS. And there are some things in that episode that we had to go back and correct a little bit later in following episodes because I got some things wrong. But I just came back to that the other day. And I was talking to this person about like a consistent global worldview, and I was able to quote Aquinas and all sorts of other things that we had talked about on the Buff that allowed me to. It's just been a wonderful growth. It has been so edifying for me personally to have a comfortable way to think about these things. Now I'm just happy everybody gets to come for a ride.
Well, and it makes your entire, you talk about your worldview, and not that it simplifies things, but it reduces things down to a common denominator. It's really hard to do math when you got lots of weird, strange denominators, but it's really easy to do math when everything has the same denominator. And that's kind of what you've done with a life and a worldview.
Right. And the other thing that I found, and it took me a while to get to this, and I don't remember if it was in grad school or early in my work career, but you can try to decide to live your life according to a set of, I'm going to call them just a set of rules. So I remember it this way. Like in algebra, they taught us that. I think this was a stupid way to teach us. If you have a negative number plus another negative number, you're going to get a negative number. If you have a negative number plus a positive number, you're going to get a negative number if the negative number's absolute value is bigger than the And I'm like, there were all of these rules, right? And I thought this is, and then they had ones for two positives, two negatives, one positive, right? And then adding and subtracting.
So you have a quad chart instead of just plus or minus.
Well, it became impossible to memorize the rules. And I was like, there's got to be a principle that I can apply to make this work. Okay. And the principle is the first number is where you start. If you add, you go to the right. If you subtract, you go to the left. Unless the thing you're adding and subtracting is negative, then you swap it. And then boom. It's like two principles to remember. And now all of the problems go away. And as long as you can have principles in your life to make things work, you will be good. And that's what we're trying to do here in the Buff.
Well, yeah, and I would say if we're going to reiterate our principles here for century number 3 of bufnagle the podcast, that is you said it earlier, and I don't know exactly how to say it myself, but the Westernization view, right? Is that generally correct?
I would call it a Western philosophy, and the Western philosophy is, I guess I'll sum it up this way: there is such a thing as truth. There is justice, right? And if you start with that, okay, there is truth, there is justice, there is, and because of that, then axiomatically there must be an ultimate truth, there must be ultimate justice, and then you start coming to this idea that, well, what does that justice look like? You come to a creator, and then you define what love is. I mean, I think you can axiomatically show that the resurrection was necessary once you establish those other things. It's a necessary condition, and I think you can reason your way. I know people that have reasoned themselves to a Christian worldview, because if you don't have the Christian worldview, you end up with a world you don't want to be part of. And the Western worldview is a Christian worldview, and I understand there's listeners to the Buff that are not particularly Christians, and you're more than welcome to come listen, to continue to listen. We'd love to have you here, and we'd love to have discussions. But that's our worldview, and we appreciate you giving us that benefit of the doubt, because that's where we stand. But it's a big tent, folks, and there's a lot of ways to do it right and a couple ways to do it wrong. As long as you avoid the bad ones, I think you're going to be okay.
That's right. And I think the most important thing is to remember to seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life. It's going to be a great day.